This airship is easily the biggest thing I've ever 3D printed. The model itself comes from my mini factory from the creator Arcane Minis. The entire thing is completely modular with inside decks and has magnetic removable elements so you can customize the ship as you please. This thing printed in a whole heap of different elements and came together looking absolutely stunning for an Airships Pirate one-shot that I ran over at Tomes and Tales RPG. So today I'm going to show you through the entire process from print to paint and getting this out on the table. So let's jump over to it. As I mentioned, this model comes from my mini factory and the creator Arcane Minis. I actually backed one of their Kickstarters not that long ago that came with a whole bunch of minis and a full Airships campaign. So I bought this originally with the idea to run that, but it's going to be used for my one-shot instead. You can buy this model individually, but I bought it with a crew pack to get a few extra minis. So I prepared all of the base bits for the ship and got them printing on my Creality Ender V3. I did have a couple of fails on the way where I didn't have enough filament in my printer, so those had to be reprinted. But ultimately, I was left with my full base airship. The overall model has 3 sections, so we can open up the ship and play on the inside if we want as well. All of the parts for this build took about a week to print, so keep that in mind when you're doing the build yourself. I connected up all of my bits and pieces and started spray painting them with a base grey. This is the same primer I use for pretty much everything, and I love to give it a good hit. Over these metallic areas, I wasn't shy about how thick I put it on because this can help fill in some of the gaps. As you can see here, there's still a fair few lines, but we'll come to that later on. For now, I'm going to be adding some magnets into all of these areas here. That give us the ability to add on our extra modular bits and pieces that give you the ability to change up the airship or let your players upgrade them as your game goes on. I love having all these different elements that can stick onto the side of the ship and give us some differentiation, because that really allows you to get the most gameplay out of a big print like this. I pulled out this Dulux hammered metal texture spray paint and gave all of the external metal pieces a really good thick hit. I love the way that this came out. It filled in a lot of the gaps and gave us a more natural metallic kind of texture. I then came in to spray our base wood and grabbed the wrong paint to start, then grabbing out a dark brown to cover that up and fill in the base for all of the wooden textures. Off camera, I hit all of the woods and interiors with this NATO brown from Tamiya Color, as I'm a big fan of the matte brown of this particular spray paint. Then coming in with a cheap silver acrylic paint over any of these metallic areas inside the build, making sure to do my best not to get it all over the wood textures, as I didn't want to have to repaint them if I could avoid it. I then took that same silver over all of our metal areas and trim, just adding in those silver details to anywhere that's going to have that metallic finish. Next up, grabbing out a Towelite Ochre and dry brushing all of our wooden textures to really bring out that 3D printed texture that looks so good. This took a while because there was a lot of those timber textures throughout this build, but ultimately I'm glad I took the time because it looks beautiful. Once I was done with that, I grabbed that same cheap silver out and hit a lot of our internal details, trying again not to cover up any of that wooden texturing where I could avoid it. But I'm not perfect, so some things did need fixing later on. All of the windows inside got a good coat with that silver. I'm thinking I might come in later on and touch these up with a bronze, but for now, we're going to be using some magnets to stick all of these bits together. Unfortunately, Amazon kind of screwed me over here. I ordered 200 magnets and they only gave me 60. So I had to pick and choose where I would place these to get the best effect. I will be filling in all of the gaps later on with some new ones that I bought, but for now we're going to just go around adding in as many of these as we can. Really making sure to have your north and south sorted out, because if you glue these down the wrong way, it's really frustrating to pull them out and it's not going to help you stick everything together. But once that's done, the whole ship should start staying together quite nicely. And now that we have the base ship done, it's time to start adding in our top railings.
I printed these all out using a resin printer quite a while ago, so I had these ready to go. I puzzled them all into place to make sure I had them in the right area, and then started gluing them down. I either stuffed up my placement, or due to the fact I printed these so long ago on resin, some of them may have warped, but ultimately this piece didn't quite fit. So I just snipped off the ends where it fit in and glued it in place, using a little bit of gel superglue to fill in the gaps, but you could also do that with an epoxy. Next up, I painted a light blue over all of our windows to look as though they were reflecting the sky outside of our ship. Then coming in with all of our outer deckings, putting these in place with some super glue and a few extra supports, and making sure that everything was lined up nicely. Once they were all solidly in place, I started adding in all of the extra railings around these, doing the same thing again, dry fitting them before coming in with the super glue and using superglue accelerant to help hold it in place nice and quickly. This time there were no issues with the placement or warping, so everything fit in perfectly. Next up, I grabbed a Fulgurite copper from Citadel and went around doing the borders of all of our windows to really make them pop. Once I'd finished up with all of the windows, I hit these large side doors to differentiate them from the rest of the metal of the ship, and then boarded our front windows. And since I did all of the outside windows, I came back in and recoated all of the inside windows with that same copper color so that everything matches inside and out.
So in our world, there's a glowing blue crystal called Elevite, and this gives things the power of flight.
So I decided to kit bash a few free crystal STLs I found on Thingiverse onto some of these base attachments so that they could magnetize onto the side of our ship. I printed them out in a clear resin and then gave them a heavy coat in a blue ink. I love the way that these inks sit on the clear printed resin, as I've shown in many other builds and done an entire video about specifically, so this is going to give us a beautiful looking crystal element for the side of our ship. The base has got hit with some copper, and now they're another element that can magnetize onto the side of our ship, along with all of these other bits and pieces that come with the model that really allow it to come to life. All of these bits and pieces can magnetize on or fit into their spaces, and we have a whole collection of different doors that clip into place and actually open. So let's take all these bits and pieces and put our ship together.
So where the ship is at now is completely fine for gameplay. This is how I ran it on the day, and my players were absolutely astounded by what I got to put down on the table. But there are a few more details that I think we could add to really make this next level, including adding our hook and chain onto the front here, finishing off a few more of our modular magnetic parts so that you could customize this or allow your players to build out the ship even further as they go, as well as finishing off the insides, as I haven't put all of our extra walls and layers in here that have come with this model. Additionally, I didn't get all of the magnets that I originally purchased, so I'll be filling in the rest of the magnets to help everything hold together better, and I'm thinking about adding some clear resin to all of the windows to give them that glass sheen. So let's jump into the final stages and adding some extra details to really bring this design to life and make it look beautiful on my shelf, since it's already ran through its gameplay and is probably now just going to be a display piece.
So I grab some UV resin and start spreading it over all of the windows. Once I have a layer of this, I hit it with a blue light to cure the resin, leaving me with a nice, reflective, glassy gloss surface. This looks a lot more like glass than the straight painted filament, as that didn't give me the perfect texture. So this gives me a nice level of differentiation from our metal pieces and helps the windows to shine. I also came in and added a few little extra paint details, bringing those doors to life, before moving on to the central walls of our airship. These all got printed and painted up just like the rest of the ship's wooden interiors, and were ready to fill in the interiors if I ever decide to play a game where we move through the insides of the ship. Now, to finish the details of these cranes, for one of them I just glued it straight in place as the design is intended, and then gave the whole thing a coat in a nuln oil just to make it look a little bit more worn and old. Then, for the second crane, I decided to give it a little bit of difference, grabbing out some jewellery chain and gluing this in place so that we had a swinging crane. With a little bit of fiddling around, I managed to glue that in place, then coming in and painting over all of the rest of the chains so that they matched, instead of it going from that clean silver straight into a hanging bronze chain. It wasn't perfect, but it was good enough for me, and we're left with two nice attachments. And since I had the copper out, I decided to hit all of these extra flourishes to bring them out a little bit more and to help continue that flourish of copper that we have running around the entire ship. The final detail was going around and hitting every single one of these rivets with a slightly different silver, just to give them that little bit of difference. This took a while, but ultimately I think it was worth it.
So now it's time to throw all these little elements together and build out our ship, as well as a whole heap of other bits and pieces of scatter that I've pulled from other builds and some different areas online to fully rig out our ship and get it ready for the Airships campaign. And there we have a complete modular airship ready for our game. This came out looking absolutely beautiful and it played out awesome at my table. I can't wait to throw this on the shelf as a display piece and hopefully find an excuse to bring it out again in the future. All of these extra modular bits and pieces just add a whole new element to the game board and really were a lot of fun at the table. By having some extra bits and pieces like this, you can bring them in and incorporate them in your game. Also, they just look really cool. I love that we can swap them out, so if we do play another game, we can modify the ship a little bit and our players get to have more of an effect on what their ship is actually capable of. But for now, I'm going to go back to my original crystals and put this on the shelf for display. I could have gone a lot further into this build. I tend to go a little bit lazier on my terrain than I do with my miniatures, but ultimately that's fine because it's just a background set piece. You could go above and beyond, cleaning up all of the edges, making sure there are no gaps that I've left here by filling them in with putty and sanding them back and really cleaning up all of those lines. But personally, I don't bother with that because these are terrain pieces and they're just there to add an extra element to the game. I go a little bit extra when I build stuff completely custom, but when I'm 3D printing something, it's more about getting something on the table that my players can explore and really use to help immerse them in the game that I'm playing. This video is not sponsored, but go check out Arcane Minis. I absolutely love their stuff and I've used a lot of it for different games, and this particular build has come out looking fantastic. So until next time, never stop making stuff.
Oh, and go check out this video here for some more cool 3D printed terrain.